Hello, everyone.
So what shall it be? Do you join the unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
The Upper Memory Block Podcast.
Building.
This show is going to be about video games.
Yes, sir, agreed. Yes, sir, at once.
What I want to do, and where the bulk of my gaming experience rests, is in the past.
Unable to comply. Building in progress. Unit ready.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Upper Memory Block Podcast. It's the historic, epic, incredible first episode, or at least I hope it's going to be, and I guess we'll find that out over the next little while. I am your host, Joe, and today we are going to be chatting about the 1993 LucasArts adventure game, Sam & Max Hit the Road, and after that, if we have some time, I may also talk about a cool technology that is associated to this game, the Scum game engine. So I guess I should start, since this is the first episode, with a little bit about myself, just so you guys know who's blathering in your ear. As I said, my name is Joe. I am 31 years old as of last week, so yay, happy birthday to me. I'm a pretty normal guy. I'm married, been married just about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years in June. I didn't forget Fran. I'm a web developer by day, which basically means I make websites do things. So if you go on some airline's website and book a plane ticket or whatever, I'm the guy that makes all that stuff happen. I don't necessarily make the sites pretty, but I make them work, and that's my job. So I'm living in Toronto right now. I've been living here for the past few years. Born in Montreal, so oui, je parle français, but I will not speak French during the podcast because most people won't understand me. Hooray. And I guess the most important thing is, why I got into PC gaming, and why I really care about this DOS and kind of early Windows era of gaming. I have always been into computers and been exposed to computers. My father was a programmer back in the day, using DBase and things like that, when it was actually horribly difficult to be a programmer, and took some brain power, unlike today, where a dumb idiot like me can make things happen. And so, ever since I remember, my parents bringing home an Apple II way back when, and sitting on my father's knee and asking him when I could push return while he was doing work. And most likely, now that I think about it, irritating the hell out of him, because every 5 seconds I was like, can I push return now? Can I push return now? And eventually he would say, yes, you can push return, and I would push return, and the world would be a great place. But associated with that Apple II were a bunch of old video games, like quite old, even obviously older than the time period that I'm talking about on this show, and those kind of intrigued me very much. Things like Troll's Tale and Defender, and I always found them very engaging, and I liked going off into their worlds and getting lost in their stories, such as they were at the time. They were much more simple than they are today, but that was how I started getting into that. And later on we got a PC and a 286 and a 386, and I started playing more and more of these games because I was young and I had the time. Unfortunately, I don't have quite as much time these days to play as many games as I did back then. And when I look back on that today, I see those games that I played when I was young, and I see games today, and there is a very logical progression from one to the other to the place where we are these days. And because of that, I think it would be very cool and very fun to do a podcast that looks at this era of gaming from about, say, 1988, 1990-ish to, say, about 2000, 2001, kind of the era of the pinnacle of, let's say, DOS gaming, into the early Windows, early DirectX days, kind of up until Windows XP, when things got very kind of much more stable and the way they are today. So, I guess that is me, and let's start chatting a little bit about our main topic, and we'll go from there.
You're listening to the Upper Memory Block Podcast. Time for
All right, so Sam and Max Hit the Road is a LucasArts adventure game released for MS-DOS in 1993. It was their ninth point-and-click graphical adventure game of this type, and since this is our first adventure game, we should probably define the genre a little bit. An adventure game is a video game in which the player assumes the role of a protagonist in an interactive story which is driven kind of more by exploration and puzzle solving instead of by kind of more combat-based twitch challenges. You know, so it's not the same, let's say, as a first-person shooter where your success will be based on your skill with, you know, speed and precision, as opposed to, you know, this type of game would be more involved with puzzle solving and figuring things out, and et cetera, et cetera. So nearly all adventure games are designed for a single player, since the emphasis in these games is really on the story and the quest and the character, and based on that, it makes designing multiplayer aspects to that game quite difficult. The games are generally designed around a main quest, which the main character is given early on in the game, and success is generally contingent, as I said, not on a score or on defeating enemies, but on completion of the main quest. Danger is generally situational, for example, not having an item to resolve a situation or making a negative dialogue choice, as opposed to being directly threatened by an enemy AI or enemy players. Unfortunately, in the Western world, this genre's popularity peaked around the late 1980s to mid-1990s, when many people considered it to be kind of among the most technically advanced games, you know, the most cutting-edge games, the games with the best graphics and the most innovative gameplay tended to be adventure games. These days, it's not quite as popular. It's considered a bit more of a niche genre. In Asia, on the other hand, adventure games are still very popular to this day, and actually nearly 70% of all PC games released in Japan are kind of this more point-and-click, walk-around adventure type place, or adventure type format. So with that paradigm in mind, here is the basic overview of the story, and we're going to get into the story much more after this, because I don't really think I can talk about an adventure game much without talking about the story. So there will be spoilers. I will tell you what goes on in the game and some of the twists, etc., but I think to talk about it, we really do need to concentrate on that. So basically, this game follows our protagonists, Sam and Max, freelance police. There's two protagonists in this game, not just the one, on an adventure which spans the width and breadth of the United States, with stops in as many zany, kitschy tourist traps as it takes to solve their case, which is finding a missing Bigfoot and his giraffe-necked girlfriend and returning them to the Cushman Brothers Carnival, from which they have escaped. So with that overview under our belts, I'm gonna go ahead and play the intro to the game. It's a little bit longer, but I think it's a lot of fun, and it'll give you an idea of say what we're getting into. So here we go.
Friends? Friends? We've only gone out together 3 times, and already you're telling me you just want to be friends? You never gave me a chance, and for that, you'll fry like a pork sausage.
It's not that I don't like you, it's just that, well, you're too nice a guy, I guess. I think I'd rather go out with someone more a bit unpredictable.
Hello.
This doesn't look like the Lincoln Tunnel, Sam.
Looks to me like a marginally volatile hostage situation, Max.
Ooh, does this mean we get to kick some puffy white mad scientist butt?
Can't think of a reason not to.
You'll be of no use, freelance police. With the flip of a lever, my ungrateful lunch date will be reduced to a half cup of disoriented atomic matter.
I knew he wasn't a real doctor.
Shall I confront, subdue, and pummel the suspected perpetrator, Sam?
Sick him up, little buddy.
Ooh! Ow!
Hey, nice one.
Yikes!
Huh?
He's not a real guy, Sam. Can I keep his head for a souvenir? Why do you suppose it's ticking?
That's no head, Max. It's one damned ugly time bomb. Let's leave this criminal cesspool pronto.
Good idea, Sam. Maybe we can ditch the head somewhere while the credits are running. Mind if I drive?
Not if you don't mind me clawing at the dash and shrieking like a cheerleader.
Sam, is pronto a real word?
Goodbye, Sam and Max. I'll never forget all you've done here today.
Okay, so we'll lower that a little bit, and we'll do some stuff over the music here. And okay, so I guess the first things first is we should talk about our two protagonists, Sam and Max. They are members of the Freelance Police, which is basically a vigilante or private detective agency run by Sam and Max. So Sam, I guess, is the kind of primary main character. He's the guy you control directly. He is a 6-foot-tall brown dog. He's a member of the Freelance Police, obviously, and he comes off as much more level-headed than his partner Max, who we'll talk about in a second, albeit not by very much. He typically wears a grayish kind of film noir style inspired suit with a fedora hat and a big blue and black striped tie that always kind of sticks out of his jacket. He has a tendency to take everything he sees along with him in the game, and apparently keeps all of his inventory items inside of a beat-up cardboard box that he carries inside his coat. Did I mention that the game is not very realistic? But anyways, that kind of goes without saying. Well, he's not obese, he's kind of a little bit large, and sometimes in the game people make cracks about his weight, and he doesn't really like that, so unfortunately Sam is a little bit self-conscious about himself. He's prone to long-winded sentences filled with very elaborate terminology, as we saw kind of a little bit in the intro there, and we'll see in a couple of other clips that we have. And well, he tends to not get very angry. He's very good at keeping his calm in tough situations and all that, but when he does get angry, he tends to take out his anger in very uncharacteristically savage ways, but usually Max is around and is able to kind of talk him down and not make him do exactly what he wants to do. So that's Sam, and on the other hand we have Max. So Max is a little white bunny, who is, despite all that, very violent and impulsive in the extreme. He's the source of much of the franchise's unique humor. So despite the fact that he looks very clearly like a little white bunny, he often refers to himself as a lagomorph. Other times he refers to himself as a rabbit. Now, I went to look it up, and a lagomorph is actually the scientific term for, I guess, the genus or whatever of a rabbit and a hare and whatever. So it actually is correct that he refers to himself as that, but anyways, he most definitely enjoys violence and prefers to solve his problems through aggression. He has a slight distaste for long stories, so whenever Sam starts kind of spouting off his very long, convoluted, technical explanations of things, Max kind of starts rolling his eyes, or when people they encounter start telling stories about how they knew someone or things like that, he doesn't hide his distaste very, very well, and he also often asks people not to use various words such as ensue or acumen, because he doesn't care for them. He shares Sam's enthusiasm in just about everything, especially if it involves big guns and some violence. And he also demonstrates that he has very poor hygiene. Often when you will kind of leave them idle without doing anything for a while in the game, Max will stand around and pick his belly button and eat the lint that he gets out of there. And Sam often comments on his body odor and things like that. So also occasionally they refer to the fact that Max has a metal plate embedded in his skull from some previous event. So basically what that shows us is that in the classic comedy team, Sam tends to be the straight man, while Max is kind of the comedy relief. During the game, as I said, you control Sam directly. Max will kind of follow along from screen to screen and wander around on his own. At times when the story calls for it or when events call for it, Max will act independently, but generally he's available for Sam to use as an inventory item, which you can then, select the Max icon and use him on things. So maybe that sheds a little bit of light on their dynamic as a team. So let's get into the details of the story a little more precisely. The game starts in similar ways to many kind of whodunit mysteries and comics with Sam and Max. Basically, they get back to their office after the marginally volatile hostage situation, which we just listened to, and they receive a telephone call from an unseen and unheard commissioner who tells them that they need to go to a nearby carnival. And at the carnival, once they get there, they talk to the owners of the carnival, the Cushman brothers, and they explain what the situation and what the case is going to be. And let's listen to that right here.
See this melted block of ice?
How could we miss it?
This used to be our main attraction.
Your main attraction was a block of ice?
Don't be dense. Our main attraction was a genuine, authentic, real-life Bigfoot on ice.
Hey, let me get this straight. You want us to go traipsing all over the country looking for a soggy Bigfoot?
I've never been traipsing before. Does it hurt?
But Bruno must be returned to us. He's a brutish, ignorant beast with no sense of right or wrong.
Hey, who isn't?
Besides, he's kidnapped our second main attraction.
Is that the block of ice?
No, it's Trixie, the giraffe neck girl from Scranton. She disappeared at the same time Bruno did. We can only assume that the monster took her when he made his escape.
I guess Max and I could search for your missing freaks, but we'll need free run of the carnival to look for clues.
Yeah, and free corn dogs, so we can uke all over ourselves.
No problem. Here's an all-day free pass.
Leave everything to us, and we'll have those abominations of nature back in your protective care before you can read the Koran.
Didn't he fight Godzilla?
So yeah, it's a little more of an example of the dialogue in the game. Anyways, with that in mind, Sam and Max have to obviously set off to find Bruno and Trixie and bring them back. So they start off by investigating the carnival and go through a couple of interesting adventures there, riding through the Tunnel of Love and on the Cone of Terror and all these things, fun rides. And they play Whack-A-Rat, which is actually a fun little mini game which is basically their version of Whack-A-Mole, where you kind of hit the rats that jump out of the little box. And so what they learn at the carnival is that Bruno and Trixie were actually in love, and Bruno didn't escape on his own. Trixie freed him, and they both ran away. So the freelance police have to leave the carnival and pursue leads at various tourist traps throughout the country, such as the world's largest ball of twine, a vortex created by giant subterranean magnets, and the bungee jumping facilities at Mount Rushmore. And that's kind of like where a lot of the comedic parts of the game come in. You're traveling around to these different tourist trappy areas in the game. For example, there's one location called Frog Rock that they go to, which the creator had actually been to once in his life. And Sam and Max comment on how they get to this rock and they look at it, and it doesn't look at all like a frog. And that was kind of the observation that Steve Purcell, the creator, who we're going to talk about in the development story section, that was his observation when he went to Frog Rock. So after visiting a few of these locations, the pair learned that two other Bigfoots used as tourist attractions in other parts of the country have also been freed by Bruno. and that Bruno has been captured by a very small British country western singer named Conroy Bumpus. Not only is he a country western singer, but he's also a cruel animal abuser who wishes to use Bruno in his performances. So Sam and Max have to travel to Bumpus's home and rescue Bruno and Trixie. They go to Bumpusville, which is a very poor imitation of Graceland, I guess, and they break into Conroy Bumpus's his mansion, and they search around in there, and they actually find Bruno and Trixie, who are playing in Conroy Bumpus's menagerie, and of course they have to sit through a performance of Conroy Bumpus's that we have here.
Bumpusville is proud to present the master of melody, the king of country, Mr. Entertainment, Conroy Bumpus.
I hate floor shows.
I remember my childhood in Brighton, when dear old Dad would bounce me on his knee. He'd say, son, there ain't nothing as exciting as exposing beasts to inhumanity. That's why I'm happy to be king of the creatures. I'm proud to be the lord of the old. I love collecting things with grotesque features. It makes me feel like some Chaldean god. Oh, I trapped my first tiger before I could speak. Killed me a bear when I was 3. And now with this Bigfoot and giraffe neck freak, I finally have a full menagerie. Hit it, boys!
That's why he's happy being feared by the one. Just to be the czar of the zone. None of us can be where we are one.
Oh, it's tough to be a country western star.
Okay, so yeah, and that kind of electrical sound that you hear in the background are electrodes that are next to Bruno and Trixie that are actually shocking them into playing their instruments and participating in the show. So, anyways, they are able to free Bruno and Trixie, and who then inform Sam and Max that the reason they escaped was because they had to get to a Bigfoot gathering at an inn in Nevada. So following Bruno and Trixie, Sam and Max go to this gathering, which is actually, it's a Bigfoot party, and they get to this inn in Nevada, and they have to get into the Bigfoot party. Unfortunately, the party is only for Bigfoots, and they have to find a way to disguise themselves. And they do. They get in. Eventually, Conroy Bumpus and his henchman, Lee Harvey, gate crash the Bigfoot party, and with the hope of capturing all the Bigfoots and adding them to his menagerie. Sam and Max manage to fool Bumpus and Harvey into trading with them and putting on their Bigfoot costume, and Sam and Max lock them in the inn's kitchen freezer. Then Chief Vanuatu, leader of the Bigfoots, in recognition for the pair's actions, make Sam and Max official members of the Bigfoot tribe and tell them that there is a spell that will make the world safe for Bigfoots again, because unfortunately the Bigfoot culture is dying and Bigfoots are dying out and they're being marginalized, and they really need Sam and Max's help to perform this ritual and this spell to make the world safe for Bigfoots again. Sam and Max agree to help, and eventually they discover that the ingredients required to do this are a vegetable resembling John Muir, famed naturalist, hair restoration tonic, and the tooth of a dinosaur, and finally a vortex contained within a snow globe. Combined with a live Bigfoot sacrifice, which Max substitutes for frozen Bigfoot-clad Conroy Bumpus and Lee Harvey. The ingredients, when put together, cause a large tree to spring into existence, large trees to spring into existence all over the United States, destroying towns and cities and covering the bulk of the western United States in a forest. Content that their work is done, Sam and Max take the frozen ice block containing Conroy Bumpus and Harvey back to the carnival, and believing that Bruno has been returned to them, the owners give a large reward of skee-ball tickets to Sam and Max, who spend the end credits shooting at targets in the carnival stall with their real guns. So that's the overview of the story. It's obviously a lot more fun and entertaining and funny than I've made it. But yeah, well, I will just give you an excuse to go and play the game to experience all the fun and puzzles and jokes for yourself.
You are listening to the Upper Memory Block Podcast.
So I figure we should probably chat a little bit about some fun stuff from the time. The tech specs, or the system requirements for the game at its release in 1993, were an IBM-compatible 386 33 megahertz. Yes, everyone, that's megahertz, not gigahertz. 4 megs of RAM and 256 color VGA graphics, since the visuals in the game were quite colorful and quite impressive. With regard to the graphics, the game does have cartoony 2D graphics that were originally rendered in VGA at 640 by 480 pixels of resolution and 256 colors. For its time, the animation was very fluid and very smooth, and due to its cartoony nature, it didn't really appear quite as, let's say, pixelated as other adventure games at the time, though there was quite a bit of aliasing, which was common due to the resolution, so curves would look a bit jaggy and all that. The background paintings were quite nice, and overall, I think the graphics were really great for the time. I don't remember ever looking at the game when I was originally playing it back in 93, 94, and thinking that it didn't look anything but great. Actually, in fact, it seems like there's a couple of scenes, like at the world's largest ball of twine, where they even integrated a couple of pre-rendered 3D scenes. There's a cable car that goes from the base to the top of the world's largest ball of twine, and you'd see it approaching, and it did look quite 3D, even though the world was 2D. It integrated quite well. With regard to the audio, the game has very high audio production values, even without the full voice acting that the CD-ROM version had. It had a very rich stable of sound effects, and the game was fully scored with a really fun, jazzy MIDI soundtrack, which you heard in the background of some of the clips that I played, which was created by LucasArts' Clint Bajakian, Michael Land, and Peter McConnell. So yeah, overall, sound, graphics, audio specs, the game was quite good, quite well done. Yeah, so let's chat a little bit more now about the development of the game and some interesting facts and stories about how the characters in the game came into being.
You're listening to the Upper Memory Block Podcast. Time for development story.
So, in the opening credits of the game, Sam and Max were said to be created by Steve Purcell. While legally this is the case, this is not, in reality, entirely true. They were actually originally created by Steve Purcell's brother, Dave Purcell. When they were kids, Dave would draw these comics of these characters, Sam and Max, that he created, and Steve would find these unfinished comics around the house, and he would actually take the comics that his brother made, and he would finish them, kind of parodying his brother's art style, kind of messing with him a little bit while he was doing it. He would, make Sam and Max do weird things, or he would make Sam and Max comment on how the art style was funny looking, or how the grammar in the speech bubbles was off, and things like that. So it was kind of this little game that they had where, Dave would start the comic, and then he'd kind of forget about it or come back to it later or whatever, and he would leave it somewhere, and Steve would find it and go and I guess kind of in Dave's eyes potentially mess it up. So Steve would continue drawing his brother's creations over the years, and kind of taking them on as his own creations or his own characters, and developing his own unique art style for them. And over that intervening time, his older brother Dave kind of stopped, either lacked an interest or started burning out on these two characters that he created when he was young. And so eventually, one birthday, Dave wrote up a contract which transferred the rights to Sam and Max officially to his brother Steve. Steve continued to write Sam and Max comics, some of which eventually appeared in the school newspaper of the California College of Arts and Crafts, which he was attending at the time. So then finally in 1987, after shopping, drawing them his whole life basically and shopping them around, in his spare time or whatever, Sam and Max made their official commercial comic debut. Fish Wrap Productions released a Sam and Max Freelance Police Special Edition, which contained two of Steve's stories called Monkeys Violating the Heavenly Temple and Night of the Gilded Heron Shark. The comic was a little bit successful. It wasn't, a huge hit or anything like that. And after that initial release, Sam and Max did have some other sporadic comic appearances, but according to Steve Purcell, never enough to actually make a living off of as a comic artist. Enough money. They wouldn't pay enough money to pay his rent and all that kind of stuff. Since he couldn't live off of his creations, Steve decided to use his talents to secure a job as a junior background artist at LucasArts Entertainment Company. So obviously this was step one into the creation of this game. Sam and Max, however, were not immediately destined to have their own video game. Initially, Steve Purcell, being kind of an entry-level background artist, was required to create, let's say, stock resources for the junior programmers to practice on. So he animated Sam and Max in their office environment, which is the first environment in the game, and those backgrounds and characters and whatever were placed into kind of the testing environment for the junior programmers that were newly hired to kind of learn how to use LucasArts' tools to make adventure games with. And of course, this had an interesting effect since all the new developers that were hired onto LucasArts were exposed to Sam and Max. They started to gain popularity within the company. Eventually, Sam and Max strips actually started to appear in the company's quarterly newsletter, which I believe at the time was called The Adventurer. You'd get copies of it when you bought games. It would come in the box, and it had articles about the different characters, and they'd have interviews with the staff of LucasArts, the designers and the producers, and all that stuff. And also half of it was the LucasArts company store, which was a lot of fun. You could order. It was one of the few places at the time where you could order merchandise. Even I remember I actually bought my Star Wars trilogy soundtrack from the LucasArts company store, mail order. But also in this, it would appear that Sam and Max comics started showing up. And then, because of that, fans started to have exposure to them, and they received praise from the fans. And at the same time, LucasArts was kind of looking around because their adventure games, Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island, the Indiana Jones games, they had all become very popular, and they were looking around for kind of an original IP, intellectual property for the lawyers in the audience, to continue riding their successes. So in 1992, LucasArts approached their employee, Steve Purcell, and offered to create a video game based on his characters, Sam and Max. So they agreed on, I guess, some type of contract and whatever, and development commenced using LucasArts' in-house game system, SCUM and iMuse, which we'll talk about in a little while. One interesting point is that this is one of the first games, definitely one of the first LucasArts games to feature full voice acting. And this wasn't some 2-bit production where they got Frank from accounting and Steve the janitor and, Marilyn the receptionist to kind of sit in front of microphones and read some lines. This was a fully well-casted, fully well-written, fully produced, voice effort. The voice of Sam was filled by Bill Farmer, who at the time, and I believe still to this day, is the voice of Goofy from the Disney cartoons. And he's a Disney fellow and all of this stuff, and he had done much more stuff before that, and he was already fairly well known in the industry. So, the main character's voice was not just some guy. He was definitely a talented voice actor. Max was voiced by Nick Jameson, who also did voice work in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, and most recently he's actually been the voice of Palpatine in Star Wars The Clone Wars. LucasArts actually referred to these initial fully voiced versions of their games as talkies, which is a reference to early film, originally when the transition was being made from silent film to, I guess, film with audio tracks and voices and all that. They were those films that were not silent were referred to as talkies. So I guess LucasArts, I'm not sure if LucasArts coined the term with regard to video games, but I do recall at the time they were advertised as talkies, which I thought was pretty funny and a great film reference. Now, CD-ROMs were definitely gaining in popularity at the time, and the CD-ROM format had the capacity to store all this voice data, but unfortunately at the time not all computers were actually equipped with CD-ROMs. I, for example, did not initially have a computer that had a CD-ROM on it when I first experienced this game. So the game was offered in a floppy disk version, which consisted of 7 3.5-inch high-density floppy disks, and obviously a CD-ROM version with a single CD. Due to the storage limitation of the floppies, that version did not have the voice acting. However, LucasArts did offer kind of a cool deal for people who bought the disc version of the game. LucasArts offered an upgrade program via, as I was talking about before, the company store. If you owned the floppy version of the game and you wanted to upgrade to the CD-ROM version, you actually could mail LucasArts the back cover of your game manual and $25. And they would mail you the CD-ROM version of the game, so you could own both the disc version and the CD-ROM version for a mere $25 and a ripped game manual.
I'm Sam. He's Max. We bust punks.
And we're overachievers.
So the game was released, and it was very well received. It was hailed as one of LucasArts' best adventure games, and later on in a couple of lists, it was in the top, I believe it may even have been the top 10 adventure games of all time. It was praised primarily for its writing and humor, and additionally the audio production and voice work were also hailed as top-notch. So you would think that with that great reviews and the unique gameplay and the unique intellectual property kind of whole world and all of this stuff that this game would be primed for sequels, especially given that it was kind of a mystery solving style of game, which is really ideal for sequels because you just kind of create a new case every game. But despite all of this success and large following in the gaming community and the gaming press, Sam & Max had a hard time, surprisingly, getting sequels off the ground. In 2001, so even the original game came out in 1993, and no attempts really were made to create a sequel until 2001. So they tried to create a game called Sam & Max Plunge Through Space, which was an Xbox exclusive title created by Infinite Machine, which was a company that was started by former LucasArts staff. The story, again, was written by Steve Purcell. Unfortunately, within a year of deciding to do the game, Infinite Machine went bankrupt, and the project was abandoned and not picked up by anyone. 1 year later, however, in 2002, at the E3 conference, LucasArts themselves announced that a PC-based 3D adventure game, just called Sam & Max Freelance Police, would be developed. Development would be led by Michael Stemmel, who was a designer on the original game that we have just been chatting about. And once again, the story and concept art were supplied by Steve Purcell, and the original voice actors for both Sam and Max, as we just talked about, were on board for the project. So that sounded great. I mean, the original company, the original crew, the original voice actors were back, but then, out of the blue, in March of 2004, 2 years later, LucasArts killed development on the game, just kind of out of nowhere, citing current marketplace realities and underlying economic considerations, which I guess in human non-lawyer talk probably means that adventure games were not very popular at the time, and they didn't think that it would sell very well. So that was in 2004. Now, in 2005, LucasArts' license agreement with Steve Purcell expired. So LucasArts no longer owned the rights to Sam & Max. So in that year, the Sam & Max franchise moved over to Telltale Games, which was also yet another company of former LucasArts employees who had worked on a number of LucasArts adventure games, including the canceled previous development of Sam & Max Freelance Police. So under Telltale Games, a new episodic series of Sam & Max video games was announced. Like both Sam & Max Hit the Road and Freelance Police, Sam & Max Save the World was a point-and-click graphic adventure game, and although it did unfortunately lack the original voice actors for the characters, it was actually released. So I guess, despite not having the voice actors, it was finally, they were able to have a game, which was great. The first episode, so the first season, this was episodic, so basically they would release kind of parts of the game every certain amount of time. The first season ran for 6 episodes, each episode itself having a self-contained storyline in and of itself, but over kind of the whole season there was an overall story arc running through the series. So the first episode was released on GameTap, the GameTap service, in October 2006, with the following episodes released regularly until April 2007, and then finally a special compilation was released on the Wii in October 2008. Second season, Sam & Max Beyond Time and Space, began in November 2007 and ran until April 2008, which I believe was another 6 episodes. And a third season, Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse, began in April 2010. I believe now all of these newer games are currently available on Steam. And I think you can buy the whole whack of them in one shot if you want, and occasionally they do indeed go on sale.
I'm Sam. He's Max. We fight crime.
And we like long walks along the beach.
So, how does this game hold up today? I would say that this game most definitely these days holds up great. It holds up incredibly well. It's a really fun game. Granted, the graphics are most decidedly 2D and they are most decidedly lower res. However, the cartoony style really makes you quickly forget that you're playing an older game. It really works. You don't really get taken out of things because, all the graphics for the time were really well done. You get really caught up in the story, as silly as it is, and you really want to kind of click on anything and everything just to see how Sam will describe it or what he and Max will do with it. The writing is just so great and so witty. They have a lot of fourth wall breaking humor that really set this game apart from other ones. For example, we have this comment right here by Sam.
That's one long loose end.
Too bad we can't reach it from this side of the deck. You always need a large piece of string in games like this.
And then, also because it's a LucasArts game, they are more than capable and I guess even encouraged a little bit to make some self-deprecating humor with regard to kind of other LucasArts franchises. For example, at one point they have to get Conroy Bumpus's hairpiece as a part of their Bigfoot costume. Now, Conroy Bumpus's hairpiece is kind of sitting on a bust that is standing on a pedestal. So to get it, Sam gets a vegetable, and he kind of pulls the whole Indiana Jones substituting the idol for the bag of dirt move, and that doesn't work out, and they get chased out of the thing and whatever, and it's just it's hilarious. And then there's fun little Star Wars references here and there, like this one.
Now that I've read that ponderous manual, I can move the robot around like this.
I'm impressed.
That's nothing. Watch this.
Help me, Sam and Max! You're my only hope!
That was gratuitous.
Sorry.
So yeah, there's a couple like that too. But yeah, I mean, overall, just because of the fun, really great writing and fun gameplay and fun puzzles and just overall humor of the game, I find that it really holds up well today and it's really worth a play. So how can you do that, actually, I guess is a good question to ask. Sam & Max Hit the Road is no longer hugely available via standard retail channels. In 2002, a Windows XP optimized version was released, And, you may, if you're lucky, find it in the bargain bin somewhere at some store, a Best Buy or a GameStop or something like that. Otherwise, it's generally available for wildly varying prices on Amazon and eBay. You could find it for as low as $5 or as high as $150. Of course, a quick Google may reveal some other ways to get it. You don't have to try very hard to find it available for download online. I'm not sure, because there are current Sam & Max games out for purchase, if this game would be considered abandonware, but suffice it to say, a little bit of very easy Google foo will find you the game quite quickly. The CD-ROM Windows optimized version that was released in 2002 runs very well on current machines. It runs fine under Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows Vista, all that. There isn't anything special that you need to do. However, if you do find the older DOS-based CD-ROM or disk version, they also run quite well under under emulators such as DOSBox or ScumVM. I actually played the CD-ROM version running under ScumVM on my MacBook Pro, and the cool thing about ScumVM is that if you play the game full screen, obviously your current computer screen is much higher resolution than 640 by 480 VGA, so blowing it up might make the game look quite awful. But ScumVM has great options for smoothing, and it makes the game look quite good on my high-res MacBook Pro monitor or my big Samsung monitor as well. So lots of opportunities to play the game, lots of cool ways to do it, and a couple of ways to get it if you try a little bit.
You're listening to the Upper Memory Block Podcast. Time for...
So, for our first Tech Focus segment, I thought I would discuss something or a system that is very important to the game that we've been talking about, Sam & Max Hit the Road, which is referred to as Scum. Scum is the game engine, basically, that was used to develop not only Sam & Max, but all of LucasArts' very popular point-and-click graphical adventure games. So the system is an acronym. It's spelled SCUMM, which stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion. So the idea behind Scum is that in programming, there tends to be an approach where if you are going to perform a common task, or a task that you're going to be doing over and over again, and the task is fairly complex, you start out by building a tool that will help you do that task. With game programming, before this whole idea came about, whenever you wanted to create a video game, you would kind of sit down in front of a computer and you would start typing. And every time, you would start typing code, and every time you created a game, you'd have to create code that, handled the graphics and handled the sound and handled what happened if you did certain thing and handled what happened if you did another thing and handled the inventory. And, so basically every time you created a game, you would have to create these systems that did these same things over and over again. So this is where the idea of a game engine was kind of born, and the programmers that created this Scum tool decided that rather than writing a single complicated program for their new graphic adventure game, Maniac Mansion, they would build a generic engine that would play pretty much any adventure game, provided it was given the proper data files. This would let them concentrate much, much more on game design and much, much less on the details of programming. And, it worked out very well, and the Scum engine was born. The way the Scum engine works is that there's a single executable program called the command interpreter, and this operates on some amount of data files. The data files contain images, they contain sound, they contain, in the case of the CD-ROM version of this game, dialogue, and details of how certain objects in the game are to behave. The interpreter then brings all of this to life and handles drawing it on the screen, animating the characters, processing inputs from the user, and all the other details that a graphic adventure game needs to deal with in order to actually work. Because the data files don't contain any code, it would be trivial to port the game to a new platform. So say you had, you created the PC version and you wanted to create a Mac version. Well, you would take all the data files and all you would do is create a Mac version of this interpreter. This is a very common way to go about things these days, but back in 1988, when they were developing this, the idea of a game engine didn't really exist. So this was kind of one of the pioneering game engines. You know, it's a lesson that most companies at this point have learned. You know, now you have a lot of games like, say, World of Warcraft runs on a modified version of the Warcraft 3 game engine. Many games run on, the Unreal Tournament engine or the Quake engine, or Star Wars The Old Republic, and some other MMOs run on the Hero engine. I mean, there's so many game engines out there now, but this and a few others were kind of one of the first ones, and I think that's really great. The Scum engine was created in 1987 by two programmers named Arik Wilmunder and Ron Gilbert. And the cool thing about this is that, since this was an internal tool for LucasArts, they weren't really required to stick to anything or have any limitations on it. So as each successive game was released, yes, they would use the same base engine, but when they had new ideas, they would just modify it. So unfortunately for people that would try and use it externally, like some people these days do, even though at the time it wasn't allowed, versions from game to game did vary very wildly in their implementations and in the things that they could do. A visual example of that is actually with Sam & Max. Sam & Max uses quite an updated version of the Scum engine, and previous games actually had kind of a lower, say a task bar or a task area, which had a list of verbs like walk, talk, pick up, climb, etc. So what you would have to do in that case, in those games, was, say you wanted to talk to someone, you would have to take your mouse pointer and click on talk, and then move the mouse pointer over to the person you wanted to talk to and click on it. So it was 2 clicks to do almost any action. With Sam & Max, what they did is they actually dropped that whole lower area with all those verbs, and they just created a couple of icons. One that was to walk, one was to talk, one was to use, and you could scroll through those icons by right-clicking the mouse. So instead of going down and clicking talk and then clicking on someone, you would just right-click and flip until the talk icon, and then click on the person, and then you could interact with them, which is great. Since they could drop that kind of lower third of the screen where all the inventory and other stuff was located, the art could take up the entire screen, which I think is one way that this game in particular kind of gave you a lot more immersion than other ones. You didn't have an interface in your way. The whole game was there, and there were only some very minor, like one icon for your inventory in the bottom, I believe, left corner of the screen. And so that's really great.
Max! Are you as confused as I am? More so.
So I guess that is the end of our first episode. I'm excited. I'm happy. This is great. I hope you guys enjoyed my first look at Sam & Max Hit the Road. I hope that you will give it a whirl if you haven't played it before, because I think it's a really great experience. And if you have played it before, I hope this may give you the itch to go and try it again and pick up on some of the fun and some of the jokes. So that'll do, and thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to the Upper Memory Block Podcast with Joe Mastroianni. For more information on the podcast, visit UMBCast.com. That's UMBCast.com. Write to Joe today at podcast@UMBcast.com. That's podcast@UMBcast.com.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.